I would say that if there's one thing to all the parents out there, it's really to take time to validate yourself, because sometimes it's really easy to get caught up in, like our mistakes or what we should have done or what we shouldn't have done, right? So I think self-care is important, right? To be able to look and to acknowledge the good that we have done, actually a lot of the good that we have done for our children, right? To take moments to look after yourselves, because sometimes I would say for mothers and for fathers, right, it can be a very tiring journey, having to juggle parenthood, having to juggle family responsibilities and, work responsibilities.
Hello and welcome to Catholic Parents Online, a podcast channel where we share tips and resources on Catholic parenting. Presented through the lens of the theology of the body, we will see how we can be gifts to our children in ways that will help them find true happiness and flourish in accordance with God's wonderful plan for each and every one of them. My name is John Hui and I'm your host for this series. Today we're going to discuss about how we can build resilience in our children. And to help us along this journey is Dr. Christine Tan E-Ching, a medical doctor who runs a mental health practice as well. So welcome to the show, E-Ching.
Thank you so much, John. It's my pleasure to be here today.
Yes, wonderful to have you as our guest today. So as perhaps as a start, we would like to introduce you to our guests, to our listeners, and to perhaps start that off. Could you share with us your little background on your family especially?
Okay, sure, John. Thanks. So basically, I have I have 3 children. My husband is also a medical doctor. He's a ear, nose, and throat specialist. And I've got 3 children. The 2 elder ones are girls, 22, 19, and the younger one is a boy, and he's 17, turning 18. So basically, just a little nuclear family here. So that's a little bit about myself.
That's great. And as a parent, I'm sure you would agree with me, there are lots of challenges, right?
Yes, definitely.
And they don't seem to ever end, right? Even for myself now as a grandparent. So would you like to share with us what are the biggest challenges you've faced as a parent in your journey so far?
I feel that, for us as parents, right, we face different challenges in different life stages. But one particular sort of life stage comes to mind. And I think it was a very difficult time for me and my family. And this was when my youngest boy came down with Kawasaki disease. Now, this was when he was around 4 to 5. And it was a very trying period because, Kawasaki basically is a disease where it's like an inflammation of the blood vessels. It happens when the child is, around that age, 4 to 5, that kind of thing. And I think it was a difficult period because basically he was very ill. And, we were he was in hospital for quite a long period. And back then, I had 2 other, older girls to sort of look after. And it was very hard for the family because back then, it was like, even after that prolonged stay in hospital and even after discharge, we had to bring him back very often for his checkups and his blood tests and all that. So I remember back then being, I would say a relatively young mother, it's like, I was in my early 30s then. It was quite hard, trying to sort of juggle work, having to look after, my boy who was ill, and then looking after the 2 elder girls as well. So that was a particularly difficult period, I would say. Yeah. I'm sure all the physical challenges, right, that besets our children, and in addition to all the emotional and sometimes even spiritual challenges that our children face, are things that we sometimes find a lot of difficulty really trying to handle and getting handle on, isn't it? Yes, definitely. And so that was a very difficult period. But I think one thing I wanted to highlight was that I am so grateful that back then, I had a good friend of mine. She was also a medical doctor, and she also, her kid was much bigger already. Back then, her child was already in his late teens, and he had Kawasaki as well. So I think, it really sort of brought home the point that, having someone to journey with me, and she was really just supporting me all throughout, giving me a lot of encouragement and hope. So I think, so when I think back of that period, I think it really brought home the point that, having someone to journey, having someone to support us good friends, I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, right. I think support groups and supportive friends are so important on this journey, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, of course, God is the most important friend, but he sends people to us. And so such individuals and groups are really a godsend.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Now, I understand you were a family practitioner before, and you decided to, in a way, launch a new path in mental wellness and mental health. Yes. Would you like to share with us what made you make that decision?
Yeah. Thanks, John. I think, over my last 20 over years of practice as a family physician, I think over time, I began to notice that, there were more and more patients coming in with various mental health issues. And I noticed also that the patients that were coming in with mental health issues were actually getting younger. So it no longer was, people in their mid-30s and 40s, coming in.
My age group, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But I was seeing them coming in much younger, some of them in their teens and some of them even in, 9, 10, that kind of age group. So it began to sort of stir up certain thoughts, within my head. And I started thinking, was there something more that I could do, right, for those people who are coming in with the various mental health issues? And then along the way, I was also very active in the parent support groups in my, children's schools. And I mean, one thing that came to the forefront was really a lot of the teenagers struggling with different issues like depression and anxiety. And we were also beginning to see more cases of self-harm. So this was really the time when I told myself, I think if I felt that, I kind of felt called to want to do a little bit more in this area. And so that's when I decided, I was going to sort of start a practice together with some of my colleagues to sort of do more in this area of mental well-being in terms of counseling and psychotherapy. Yeah.
Must have been quite a big jump.
For sure. So I think I did spend quite a long time trying to discern and pray, as to, because I wanted to be kind of like, I wanted this to be something that was, it wasn't just from me. I felt something that was a little bit deeper than myself. I can't quite put this in words, but yeah. So it's like, it was something that I felt that I was called to do. And I felt that I had a bit of this, I would say, I just felt, something in me that was a little bit deeper, some stirrings within me to want to do a little bit more in this area, particularly in this area of youths and adolescents. Yeah.
As a matter of curiosity,
yes.
Did you happen to come across any suicides among the youth that
you
saw?
Actually, the answer is yes. That was because back then, because of my active work in the parent support groups in the schools, yes, so that was something that I came across. And I also got to know some friends of mine who were in this, some of these support groups for parents who had lost their children to suicide. So I felt deeply, I would say, I was deeply moved to want to do something more, right, for the youths. And I felt that so much could be done upstream rather than trying to sometimes grapple with the downstream problems. Yeah, so for sure, yes.
Certainly. And I think that basically what I imagine you're doing would be to try to build resilience in the people whom you journey with. Yes. That's a very important, in sense, of quality that you want to instill and build in them, right?
Yes, definitely, John. Yeah. Resilience to me is something which is so important because, all of us, I would say at some point in our lives or various points in our lives, right, would face challenges. And resilience is really the ability to bounce back from adversity. And to me, I think this is really a fundamental sort of a quality that I feel that can be imbued in our children. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess it is important in resilience, in building this quality in our children to help them face adversities in the world, right? Because I think as it is, challenges will never end, even for us parents and grandparents like myself. And it is something which I'm sure we will need to overcome in its various forms and at any stage of our life. And it is something which perhaps many of us have not been able to build upon, right? For whatever reason may be. Yeah. So perhaps would you like to share with us some practical tips on how we can build resilience in ourselves and in our children?
Okay. Maybe I'll share a little bit about what I do, right? I mean, within my family. I think first and foremost, I often encourage my children to actually push themselves a little bit out of their comfort zone, right? Taking on little things that, they feel that sometimes, for example, taking social anxiety as an example, this is something that I tend to see quite a lot in the teenagers. There's often this worry about how other people judge them, right? And I would say that, even with my children, sometimes, when they were going through the teenage years, they would share with me sometimes worries about how their friends would look at them and things like that. And very often I would say, look, you can take on, or you can, sort of join your friends for certain activities or take on certain projects that would sort of push you a little bit out of your comfort zone. So I think the first thing would be to encourage our children, all right, to sort of get themselves, in different things that would sort of make them a little bit uncomfortable, this slight sense of discomfort, without them really feeling overwhelmed. So I think that would be one, right? The other thing about building resilience, all right, would be actually fundamentally having this sense of awareness. Now, one of the fundamental pillars I feel about building resilience would be building the muscle of awareness. Because sometimes I feel that, when there is no sense of awareness as to how we feel or what are some of the thoughts that we have or the emotions that we have, it's very hard to kickstart this journey of well-being. Right? So when I try to build awareness in my children, it might look like, sort of sometimes at the end of the day, coming together, maybe having a chat about how they felt about certain, issues, about certain challenges that they're facing, right? Or sometimes even just sitting down together, doing a little bit of prayer or even a little bit of a mindfulness, sort of a meditation session. So it's about building the awareness. I feel that part is really important. And the third thing would be to cultivate this heart of gratitude. Now, sometimes it's kind of easy to talk about counting our blessings, but I feel that it takes a certain amount of intention and practice. So it's about building that, sort of attitude of gratitude, so to speak, right? Really looking out for the little things in our lives that actually, I would say, are beautiful. And so this is a message I often tell my children, right? We don't really need something to be really great or positive or wonderful to happen around us. But the fundamental thing about gratitude really is about observing. So when you begin to see things around you, you can actually look out for things that can be really very joyful. So I think this is one thing, building up this sense of gratitude within us and with our children and within the family, right? Actually builds the muscle of resilience, right? So these are actually some very simple ways, I would say, that, parents can actually build a sense of resilience in their children. But I think one final point I want to make is that we as parents actually need to model some of these things that we have talked about. For example, being grateful, so I find for myself, I'm quite intentional especially when I'm with my children. What I say or the behavior that I manifest. So for example, things like gratitude, right? I think we as parents can do it ourselves, for example, right? Just pointing out certain things that are nice, at the end of the day, right? Or whether is it a nice meal that we had or maybe just a nice cup of coffee. So I like to highlight this, whenever I talk about these things to my children, what were the good things that happened that day? Not necessarily something big, but even the tiny things as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what you've mentioned is so true, right? That we need to be there for them and at the same time really be able to communicate at the feeling level.
Yes.
Right? I think many times we tend to forget that we tend to just focus on the mechanics of our daily lives and what needs to be done and so on. But we need to forget about connecting with the feelings of our children, right?
Exactly.
And I think what you brought up is so important, right? Just being there for them, affirming them of our presence, of our being there for them, no matter what, and really being there to listen to their feelings and allowing them to express those feelings, right? Whether they felt sad, they felt hurt, they felt embarrassed by something that happened, and just being there for them to empathize with them, not to judge, right? But just to empathize with them and to let them know and feel that they are listened to.
Yeah, right? That's so true, John. Before coming on this, Zoom call, you had shared some questions that you might be asking me, and it was interesting. So last night, I actually sat down with my kids and my husband, and we had a chat because I wanted to hear from them what were some of their thoughts, about the questions that you had sort of, put to me, right? And it's interesting. So when my kids basically shared with me, and I was very touched actually, because when it came to this question about, what are some practical tips or what are some of the values that you live by, as a parent. And my daughter actually said, Mom, actually, it's kind of obvious to me what is the most important thing in the family. So I said, really? Tell me, what is it? I wasn't quite sure. And she said, it's open communication. And I must say, John, that when she said that last night, right, I was really very touched because my daughter, she shared with me that she knows of many friends who sometimes find it difficult to tell the truth to their parents, right? Because there's often this fear of backlash, of judgment, like you mentioned earlier on. And so when she brought this up and she said, hey, because I was kind of coming up with a few other, sort of thing, right? Like, for example, okay, I'll talk about that later. But yeah, so she said, no, I think the most important thing that you have always encouraged us was to have open communication. So in a way, I would say that I'm very grateful that my kids are able to openly communicate with me and my husband, about the different issues that they have or the challenges that they face. I think I think it's always trying to give them this atmosphere that whatever they say, we are here to listen to them sort of with empathy and without judgment. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And the other thing that you brought up, right, about gratitude is something which I would fully agree with as well, because and role modeling, because I saw that in my own mother. Whenever something good, little blessings that came along our way, we came from a very poor background, right? Little blessings that came our way, and she'll say, oh, thank God, thank Mother Mary, for her prayers. And then after that, when something not so nice happened and all that, don't worry, just pray to God, let him take care of things, we'll entrust him and ourselves to him and ask Mother Mary to pray for us. Yes. And then when something happens and things come about well again, and she says, you see, thank God, thank Mother Mary. So it's something which in a way I've seen happening so frequently in my younger days that I see it as a good role model to follow. Yes. And I realized that having that sense of gratitude gave me the sense that actually it is God who is in charge of everything. Yes. And not ourselves. I think if we were to think that we are in charge of everything in our lives, every situation and every difficult problem we face, I think we would have a lot of issues tackling them because we are not God, right? Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's something which I really wanted to pass on to my kids as well. And just everything at the end of the day, you just thank God for what happened during the day. Yes. Sometimes even the negative things that may have happened, which actually helped us learn something from. Yes. And then help us to, in a way, become better or at least a bit stronger to bounce back from that negative experience.
Yeah, I really love that, John. Sharing about your mom, that really resonates. Sometimes having such a wonderful role model in our lives is really such a blessing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that since we are on this topic of gratitude, right, we know that in a sense, God is such an important part of our lives, right? In your work and in your experience in trying to build resilience, right, in your patients and the people you journey with, how important do you find faith as part of this journey?
John, I would say that actually faith is instrumental in this journey of recovery. whether we actually talk about it explicitly or we don't. At least within my family, right, I would say that faith is really central. And so very often there is often this sense that, I love it earlier on when you said that actually at the end of the day, we are not in control. A lot of times we want a sense of control, and therein lies that struggle, right? So, I would say that personally for me, this is still a work in progress, right? Having this sort of learning to be able to let go, right? And to surrender. So I feel that this is really a path that each and every one of us is on. And that's why, whenever I talk to my kids, I would say that, faith is really something that holds, it's the glue, it's a central thing that holds the family together, right? So when it comes to the recovery journey, I would say, of patients and, you might say the youth or the adolescents, I'm also very sensitive to the fact that, some of them are Christians, they come from really different religious backgrounds sometimes, right? So I am sensitive, and I would say that for those who are believers, right, yes, I do bring that element in, right? Sometimes for those who are not, then I am sort of attuned to that as well. So I would say that having the faith element, in this whole recovery journey actually helps things. It makes the journey somewhat smoother, a little bit faster, I would say. Yeah, without doubt. Yeah. So I really like that question.
Well, following up on that, then,
yes.
Would you like to share with us how, as a family, you try to inculcate a more spirit-filled environment to bring up the faith?
Yeah. So actually, oftentimes, right, we try to spend as much time as we can on a daily basis. So, for us, meals are oftentimes to come together to bond and to chat. One thing I want to sort of highlight is that, sometimes it's a little sad when I go to cafes or, the restaurants, and I notice that a lot of families are really sitting at the table, eating, but yet, they're all looking at their devices.
Yes.
So I feel that that is something that actually it's a low hanging fruit. To all the parents who are listening, right? Maybe just to sort of tell the kids and say, hey, look, this is a family meal time. So maybe a very easy thing that we can do is just to put aside the devices and just spend some time chatting about the day's events. So it has become like a family tradition, like, at least, we try to spend meal times together, dinner time, everyone, whoever can make it, we try our very best to come together, to eat together, right, and share about the day's events. But at the very least once a week, right, we have what we call like a family gathering where we come together to go and we kind of do a little bit of a deeper sharing. So in this family time, right, we actually start off by talking about what we actually are grateful for with regards to one another, right? It's kind of interesting. So we might all sit around, and then I might, so maybe I might start and I say, actually, this week I'm really grateful for Daddy as my husband, because, for this or that. So it becomes a session. Then I might go around and I say, this week I'm really grateful for Sarah, for, something along those lines. Mm-hmm. And it's very powerful because as you go around that family circle, right, everybody raises something that they are grateful for with regards to someone else, in the family unit. And for me as a mother and a wife, it's very powerful to hear, words of affirmation from my husband, or words of, gratitude from my children. So we like to start off like that first. And I think this is a very helpful practice because it brings everyone together. It's an intentional period of bonding. So after this session where we kind of talk about the things that we appreciate about one another, then we take it one step further and we might just share some of the challenges that we had faced that week. So I find that quite a powerful session, actually. So we try to do this every week. And so that's one. And on top of that, of course, it would be, I do like to sort of pick out certain books, and we do book clubs, right? So sometimes it could be a book of somebody's choice, and usually it's something spiritual in nature. Right. And then we would sort of say, okay, everyone's going to read chapter 1, and then we're going to come together and discuss. And then you find that book we sort of dissect it, we share, our feelings and our experiences. And so it's pretty fruitful, I would say. So, doing different activities like this, coming together to pray. And the kids have always been aware that, mommy and daddy always have journeyed with them, as they went through their journey. So when the children were attending their, catechism classes and all that, we would sort of try to take part actively. So there was a period I was kind of like one of the assistant catechist teachers in Holy Family. And then along the way, whenever they had their camps and all that, or their retreats, my husband and I, we would try to participate, or volunteer our time. So things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it looks like what you've done was very intentional. And you really made it clear that you wanted to have sessions whereby you could affirm each other, hear each other out, listen to each other, empathize with each other, and then pray together, right?
Yes.
Right? It looks like it's a very intentional journey that you've undertaken.
John, I'll just share with you that it takes quite a bit of discipline and commitment to do this, because sometimes after a week or two, it's easy to say, I'm just tired. There are other things to do this weekend, right? Like go out or do something. So can I just say that I think it takes a certain amount of doggedness to get this thing off the ground.
I'm sure.
After a while, so it's always like saying, okay, come, it's Sunday afternoon, let's all come together. And sometimes the kids will groan and they'll say like, must I really do this? Especially my youngest son, Yeah. Something like that. It's only like, I've got all the other, I've got lots of work to do and stuff like that.
Yeah, sounds so familiar to me.
But at the end of the day, they kind of know me, because then I'll say, no, I think, so I think it comes back to this whole thing that, sometimes when people talk about parenting and what kind of styles of parenting really work, right? I think for me personally, right, it really has to be that middle line. One cannot be too permissive, as in to give them a whole free space without any boundaries, but yet to swing to the other extreme where one is really authoritarian, it doesn't work as well. Right, because then you're going to sort of get the kids to build up this, defensive wall. So I think giving them that space and yet clear boundaries, so they kind of know me in the sense that they say, okay, so, mom is calling us to go for our family meeting.
Yeah. After the World Cup, the picture that comes to me right now is imagining our children playing football in a huge open field. All right, but with adequate boundaries to protect them from dangers that are outside that perimeter. And at the same time, having certain rules that while they are playing, and if certain fouls are committed, then the whistle has to be blown to tell them, oops, sorry, that's a foul, and don't do that again, right? Yeah, but otherwise they're free to play the game and enjoy it.
Yeah. My kids kind of know it, because I think my husband is the more... he's kind of cool and chill, and he's like really relaxed. So I think, so they kind of know that there's a bit of this balance. So like I said, to get that regular family, sort of meeting, or, sort of getting it off the ground, right? It really took a bit of effort, not easy, because I would often say that to me, right, consistency is key. It's kind of like, it's easy to sort of try to do it once or twice, but to be able to consistently do it, I think it takes a bit of discipline and prayer.
It certainly does. Yeah. I think for us parents, we just continue to pray, pray for that consistency and the discipline, like you mentioned, to really continue with such practices that we know are for the good of our family, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, but it's not easy.
It's not easy.
Fully agree with me. I've fallen quite a few times. Many times.
So have I.
And every time you have to just get ourselves back again and say, look, we've got to get back together to do this again, and things like that. So my wife and I just have to keep encouraging each other. Okay, let's do it. Okay. And every day we'll just keep on praying for our family and praying for our children, and praying for this ability to continue doing what we should be doing as parents. Because so often we fail.
Yeah, it happens to me all the time as well. All the time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's been quite interesting. I think the what you've really brought up is so important, right? Role modeling, empathy, communication, right? And then setting the boundaries which are needed in order for them to really flourish, but at the same time, not restricting them such that they are unable to flourish well, as well as in a way God would want them to, in a sense. Yeah, I think that there's always the temptation and difficulty on us as parents, right, to find that balance, like you said, between authoritative parenting and overly liberal parenting.
Yes.
I think the balance is quite difficult to achieve sometimes, I must say.
Yes, very true, John. Yeah. I'll just say that, parenting is not easy at all. It's, I think it's really one of the toughest, it can be one of the toughest, you can say vocations,
I would fully agree.
Yeah. So, that's why I would say that, as parents, I think being able to learn to sort of equip ourselves with some of the skills, I would say is important. Whether is it just reading some parenting books, or maybe, sometimes asking for advice from people who are a little older than us, the older couples who have gone through, their parenting journey when the kids were young, just asking for advice. I think it really helps. It just takes a village, honestly, to raise a child. So, yeah. So I've often felt that, this need to want to sort of learn, what are the different ways that we can engage our children, and what are the different ways we can sort of help ourselves, right? Yeah, it's
so true. In some other podcasts, I had shared that actually I am in a kind of like little support group with other fathers, and grandfather as well. So we actually sort of like meet up once a week, and then we actually share with each other. We get some reading material, spiritual reading material, and one of those books that we can then reflect on, or one of those documents from the church that we can reflect on, and then we share them. We also share with each other then sometimes some of the challenges that we face. And sometimes how we messed up.
Wonderful.
We pray together, we support each other, and we help each other through that journey. It's not easy.
Yes. Yeah. John, that's so meaningful. I feel that actually it's hard to do parenting on our own steam. And I think sometimes just having a community of parents that, we can reach out to, or people that can mentor us, right? I think that really, really helps.
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
Helps.
Because after all, we are made in the image and likeness of God, right? Who is communion, right? Eternal exchange of love. And I think we are made for communion. Yes. Within our families and with our friends and other relatives and so on, who can come together and support each other through this very difficult journey.
Yes. Yeah.
Even up to today, sometimes I've had once or twice where my daughters, one of my daughters met on and off mentioned, Dad, last time, because we are journeying with our grandchildren, right? Their children, and we see them parenting a bit differently, all right? And then when we talk about it, say, Dad, actually last time, do you know that I was a bit hurt when you said this or you did this, and all that. So so now I'm making a point to not do that with my kid, and they explain to me why they're doing it. And it helped me realize, oh my goodness, what I said at that time was actually not a good thing that I did, and it is something which I then continue to learn from even today. And I learned from them certain skills of parenting, perhaps now grandparenting, as I see how they parent their children. And it's a result, not just of our role modeling, but also because of the mistakes we made when we were parents, and we were parenting them in the younger days.
Yeah. John, I really love that point that you raised, right? Because I feel that it really brings home the point that I think we as parents, we need to be humble. So there's this sense of humility and openness, because it's so true that, sometimes I'm caught out by my children. They would point out certain things that I might have said or done that, because they would say, actually that when you said that, it didn't feel so good, that kind of thing, right? So I feel that it really is a humbling lesson. It's a lesson in humility, right? So I think it's so important that, and you shared earlier on, right, about wanting to learn some of the mistakes. And I say, hey, that really totally resonates with me. It's about coming to this whole parenting journey with a sense of humility and openness, because just as we are trying to teach our children, actually, I would say that most times I'm learning a lot from them as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. Well, actually, it's been a wonderful time with you, E-Ching. We've really learned a lot from you, and thank you so much. But before we end, I'm wondering whether you have any, final words of advice for parents in helping our children build resilience, and be tougher in this very, very challenging world.
John, I would say that if there's one thing to all the parents out there, it's really to take time to validate yourself, because sometimes it's really easy to get caught up in, like our mistakes or what we should have done or what we shouldn't have done, right? So I think self-care is important, right? To be able to look and to acknowledge the good that we have done, actually a lot of the good that we have done for our children, right? To take moments to look after yourselves, because sometimes I would say for mothers and for fathers, right, it can be a very tiring journey, having to juggle parenthood, having to juggle family responsibilities and, you know, work responsibilities.
Yeah, just look at all the hair I've lost over the years.
Yeah, so I would tell parents out there, you know, give yourself some space, make sure that you take care of yourselves, right? And I would say that, you know, between husband and wife, I think the marital relationship is also very important to sort of cultivate, right? Because as we are sort of, when you have a good marital relationship, then it kind of spills over to the children as well. But having said that, even for the single parents, I would say, you know, it's good to look after yourself and have enough self-care so that when we resource ourselves, then we are able to sort of look after our children better as well. Yeah, John?
Yeah, sure. And perhaps they can find a support group too. There are quite a few groups around there with, I think, beginning experience and surviving divorce. There's some of the groups within the Catholic Church that actually enable and empower single parents to give the best that they can to the children while being nourished as well.
Yes.
So that they will not be drained, because it is a very tiring journey.
It is.
Yeah. But with God's grace, we'll survive.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm still alive. Well, thank you very much, E-Ching. It's been wonderful having you on this podcast and sharing your expertise and experience with us. I'm sure this has been very helpful for many of us parents as we continue to guide our children in building resilience in themselves, right? So thank you once again, E-Ching.
Thanks, John, for having me today.
Most welcome, and the pleasure is all ours, and we look forward to perhaps seeing you again.
Okay, thanks, John.
Right.
Okay,
thank you very much.
Right.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.